This is William DeMille. I have spent my lifetime being a farmer, in a profession that values the natural world, and what it can produce for humanity. I created this channel to share with you how raising food enriches the human experience. I do this by focusing on the little things, the quiet moments, the solitary vistas, the dusty trails, the hard times, the good times, and the real times, including the lows of heartache and the highs of shared laughter. Join me today as we cultivate something beautiful. Good morning. I'm William DeMille, and today we're going to talk about Georgics. There's been a question, why do I call my YouTube channel the Georgic School Room? We're featuring the Sorensen Ranch here, and I call it the Georgic School Room because the word Georgics means to farm, or it means a poem about farming. Georgics is kind of an obsolete word in our world today. If you're going to higher level education classes in college, you'll hear about Georgics. If you're in literature classes, you'll probably study Virgil's Georgics. He's the one who came up with the word. So Georgic means to work the land or to farm the land. It's a pretty ancient word from the Roman Empire when Virgil was alive. The Georgic literary tradition actually started 600 years before Virgil. In the Greek Empire, or the first writings we know of on Georgics is Hesiod, and he has writings on growing food, and if you work enough, then you can conquer all your problems. There's some great quotes from Hesiod. One of my favorite quotes, he says, "Build barns, for it will not be summer forever." The whole idea that enough work conquers all. We have to realize and take into context what they were talking about at that point in history. They were in the agricultural age at that time, and so it's a pretty neat thing to be able to look and to study what ancient Georgics was. When we look at Georgics today, there's two arguments on Georgics. And I'm talking about the literary tradition of Georgics. One side of Georgics is the idea that you're going to work, you're going to go through hardship. It's the idea that if you cut your hay, the weather is going to change and it's going to rain and it'll ruin and spoil your hay crop. It's kind of a cynical view that a lot of farmers that I've known over the years seem to have. The idea of opposition in all things. If you try to do something good, something bad will happen. These are the kind of the Georgic ideas. The school of hard knocks, that's kind of a Georgic idea. The other side, the other argument to Georgics would be the pastoral literary tradition, where you have writings about how beautiful and how wonderful the outdoors is, and how nature is pristine, and you have verdant fields that are beautiful and they fill you with joy and happiness. The pastoral idea is that everything is beautiful and it's artwork. When you go into nature, it can be a worshiping experience. Now, on the other hand, Georgics would argue, when you go into nature, it's trying to kill you. There are sharp claws and teeth that are trying to eat you. There are briars and thistles that are going to poke you and hurt you. And you are going to starve to death if you don't harness nature and subdue nature and manipulate nature to get it to produce food for you. So there's these two extremes when we talk about Georgics. So I call this the Georgic School Room because I love the lessons that nature teaches us. I love the lessons that farming teaches us. And to me, nature, farming, Georgics, the pastoral tradition, it all needs some middle ground. Because when you're farming, you're in that pristine, beautiful place. When you're growing food, you're partnering with nature. I don't know that we actually have to subdue nature and break her wild spirit, but we need to work with nature to create beautiful times in our lives, to create beautiful food, to have satisfaction as a human being. These are the things that I like when we talk about Georgics. So why did I call it the Georgic School Room? I think there's power in learning about the past, in learning about history, in learning about what past generations have known. I remember listening to my grandpa talk, and he would talk and tell all kinds of stories about having a homestead on the Arizona Strip way back, in the early 1900s, and the hardships they went through and the things that they learned. I remember listening to my grandmothers talk about the way that they grew up, and it's fascinating. And then you read about people who've been gone, back 4 generations, 10 generations. We can go back to the histories of the Romans, who were farmers. They were very successful agriculturists. You go back to the Greeks, who were very successful agriculturists, and we read the things that they write, and we learn this Georgic tradition. We can read the modern authors. We can read Wendell Berry, who I think tends toward more toward the pastoral in writing. That could be argued, but that's the way I see it. That's my opinion. You read Victor Davis Hanson, and he leans more to the Georgic side of the argument. So it's fascinating to read and to see these authors. And of course, Victor Davis Hanson and Wendell Berry, those are modern authors. I think they're both still alive today. And we can learn from nature through working with nature by producing food. I think food producers, farmers who are producing food and flowers and fiber, those people are the closest to the earth. I think you are removed away from the things that the earth can teach us if we're just a hiker or a camper, but we're in nature, we're doing things, we're recreating in nature. Storms can come in and strand us, and now we're in a survival situation. We certainly have those close ties to nature, but I think people who are trying to eke out an existence and make a living and a profit in today's world by being, and I say today's world, it goes clear back to the beginning when Hesiod was writing. Those people were trying to make a living too. But we learn super important lessons on the most deep level, on the most fundamental level. I don't think you can learn any more from the earth than if you are on that level of producing with nature things that we need to be alive, like food, water. Talk to a well digger, an old-fashioned well digger who had a shovel and had climbed down in there. I mean, those wells could cave in. There were things the earth would teach you. So this is the Georgic School Room. It's a school room because we learn in the school room. So we're out in nature, we're producing things. Like Jared said on a previous video, if you have livestock, you're going to have dead stock. That's just the way it is. But do we want livestock? Absolutely. If there was no livestock on the earth, the system would be cracked. It doesn't work as good if you don't have grazers. You need the grazers. Look at the African prairies, the vast amount of grazers that are out there, and we need those in our agricultural systems. We need the cattle and sheep and horses and all the grazers that do their thing to be able to have a really good system. And so we learn these things in the Georgic School Room, and that's what I'm doing with this video and this whole channel, is to show how the earth teaches us. That's why I called it the Georgic School Room. The more we learn about the things that the earth has to teach us through this process of producing food and clothing from the environment of the earth, I think the more we figure out that we don't know very much. And that is a big part of this Georgic School Room. Like Einstein said, the more I learn, the more I figure out I don't know. And that's what anybody who's truly learning, we come up with more questions than answers. And that's just the way it is. We go and say, oh, I'm going to figure out the answer to this. And we may figure out the answer, but then we have 5 new questions that we didn't know we had. And so it becomes this fascinating, awesome experience to be able to be schooled by the earth. Remember, geo means earth, or means work. So Georgic is the work of the earth, or farming. That's what the original people meant. When Virgil came up with the word Georgic, he meant farming. That's what it translates to today. Because he saw that this would happen, which is interesting. I don't think he was a farmer. He was a poet from the high class people of the Roman Empire, you know. And he was hired, and he was paid money by the guy in charge, the emperor of Rome, to write these poems to remind people about the good old days. Back in the good old days when everybody was farming. So it's kind of funny and it's sort of interesting. He was looking at it more of a pastoral. I mean, he really, I think his mindset was a pastoral world. Because he had the city, he had the comforts of life, he had the things that Rome had. They had running water and public baths, and it was a pretty highfalutin society. They weren't living off the land. Certainly there were people who were, just like today there's people who do. But they had a society where, you know, he came from high society. And yet he was writing about, oh, let's remind the people of the good old days. And so he's talking about how it feels to be sweaty and hot. That sun is just bearing down on you and you're plowing all day long. And because you plowed all day long, now you can reap a harvest at the end of the year. And you're going to get blisters and it's going to hurt. And people would read this and they'd be like, yeah, man, those farmers, they are so tough. They work so hard. And we hear that today. People have told me that. Man, you're working so hard. And it's an interesting thing because this has happened throughout history. 2,000 years ago, Virgil wrote about it. 2,600 years ago, Hesiod wrote about it. You can see these same things when you read the history of Switzerland. You read about the Anglo-Saxons. The Japanese have writings about this. The Chinese have writings about this. And when you start thinking in this way, this difference between the pastoral view of the way people see the world and the Georgic view of how they see the world, when you think in those terms and then you start reading the ancient literature, it's fascinating because you can see where an author is coming from. And so I love that. Georgic is an obsolete word in our world today, although it's coming back. There's a book called American Georgics that was recently published in the last decade. And so the word is starting to come back into, people are starting to talk about it again. So it's a neat thing, and I just wanted to help to bring the word out of obscurity. So I called my YouTube channel I guess the channel isn't called it, but all my episodes in this one playlist are called the Georgic School Room, and hopefully this kind of explains why. Georgic. We work the earth, and for payment we receive great knowledge. Thus a schoolroom. This is what I love, and this is what I do, and I just wanted to share it with the world for anybody who happens to be interested. Thank you very much and have a great day. Thank you for enjoying this small moment with us. It is our hope that it blessed your life. As the sun sets, the earth rests, and so do we. Tomorrow we start again to grow a future in our corner of the world.